As American Jews, we are confronting the reality that we dreaded and feared. It could happen here. We are mourning in some ways the loss of American Jewish innocence. Yet, synagogues all over this country are tonight not less filled, but they are more filled. By being here, by coming together here at Beth Yeshurun, we are telling the world, we will not run away. We will not cower. We will not allow the hate of a few to drive out the love of the many. This Shabbat can be, it must be, a Shabbat of defiance and continuity. Our Torah portion this week, Hayei Sarah, speaks of death, of continuity, of consolation, and it is very instructive for us as a people and as individuals at this moment of crisis in American Jewish life. There's no massacre in our Torah reading tomorrow, but there is insecurity. Abraham, the first of the patriarchs, the father of the Jewish people, is already 137 years old. And at the very beginning of the Parsha tomorrow, we learn of the death of his beloved Sarah, the first of our matriarchs, the mother of the Jewish people. Abraham is bereaved. He is vulnerable. We see the first glimpse of his emotion as he weeps over his loss. Yes, Abraham is already a wealthy and influential man whom the Torah describes as a person who's made his mark on the wider society in commerce and defense, and no doubt with his ethical monotheism. And yet the trauma of the death of a loved one makes him unsure, uncertain of his place in the wider society. He says to the Hittites, the local majority, words that our ancestors have recited for centuries. Ger v'toshav, anochi imachem. I am both a permanent resident and a stranger in your midst. In a moment of terrible personal crisis, Abraham seems to lose his footing, not sure any longer of his place in the wider world. Many of us experienced the trauma of last Shabbat through our history of Jewish vulnerability. Perhaps, for some of us, for the very first time. Could it happen here? What does the spike in anti-Semitism mean for me, my family, my loved ones, my community? We have witnessed the massacres in churches, the torching of mosques, the damaging of synagogues, the rise in hate crimes, particularly against Muslims and Jews over the last few years. We dreaded and feared what could happen, and it has now happened. The most deadly anti-Semitic carnage in our magnificent American Jewish history. And it scares us. Of course, we realize that this is an act of a madman, of a crazed bigot. But we also sense that something is happening, that the darker side of America, a side that had been subdued, is surfacing, sometimes with very violent consequences. There was a lot at stake when Abraham seemed insecure. The future of the nascent Jewish people hung in the balance. And yet Abraham regained his poise, buried Sarah, and turned his focus to assuring the future of Am Yisrael, our people. He found a bride for his son Isaac, and so the lineage he began with his beloved wife might continue. We are far from being ready to regain our confidence. The wound is still too fresh. The families in Pittsburgh are still in the midst of multiple Shiva homes and unbearable grief. But tonight, by being here in such large numbers, we take a first step as Americans, as a Jewish people, as members of Congregation Beth Yeshurun. The question I ask all of us tonight is, when we leave here, what can we do? Like Abraham, Let us regain our confidence as individual Jews and as a large and vibrant Jewish community. Let me suggest that the best way to do this is to be even more Jewish. There are 4 steps we can all take, no matter our age, no matter who we are. Number 1, let us attend more services. Not just after an anti-Semitic event. Can we come when it's just a regular, plain old, beautiful Shabbat service? Our weekly time to recharge our batteries and connect with our community. Number 2, can we represent our people in doing even more to make a difference in the greater non-Jewish community around us? As I spoke on Yom Kippur, we as Jews share a tradition that calls upon us to do whatever we can to improve the lives of others in need, no matter who they are, Jews and non-Jews. The common thread that connected our 11 victims was that they were extremely kind people who were always looking for ways to help others. Tonight, the world is a darker place without them. Through our social action work, can we create the light that has been lost? Number 3, can we do even more to build connections with the other great communities of our diverse city? This past Sunday night, thousands of people gathered at our Jewish Community Center to hold a vigil. For those of you who were there, you know what I'm talking about when I say how heartwarming it was, how inspiring it was to see so many non-Jewish friends that were there, members of the Christian community, members of the Muslim community, elected officials, police officers, so many members of different communities who stood with us that night to say, you are not alone. Thanks to the work of AJC in our federation, along with the incredible interfaith work that my colleague Rabbi Morgan does, we have some of our Christian and Muslim friends with us tonight. I want to ask those who are members of the non-Jewish community that are with us this evening, please rise so we can thank you for standing with us. Thank you. Tonight's a reminder that we're never alone. Thank God for America. Thank God we live in a place where police officers risk their lives to save Jews. It was usually not the case for our ancestors. Thank God we live in a country where when we come together for the next Shabbat, Christians and Muslims join us in a synagogue. Unfortunately, it was not like that for our ancestors. We have much to celebrate as we mourn this evening. We are not alone. As there's no doubt that we all sense a change that has happened in our country over the last several decades. Well, thank God there are many more people that still stand with us. Something has changed in America. The rise of social media has created so many dark places where hate is flourishing. It used to be just enough to say what our Christian friends say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, as our friend Iman Wali Dasuni said at an event yesterday at Congregation Beth Israel, in the era of social media, you should tweet others the way you want others to tweet you. But as hate continues to grow on the dark places of the internet, far too many politicians from all political parties have proven themselves willing to tolerate it. Some elected officials perpetuate the hatred. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said it well in his eulogy after 4 girls were murdered in their own house of worship in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. The great MLK said, quote, "We must be concerned not merely about who murdered them, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced the murderers." Hate is being allowed to flourish in today's America, so it should be of no surprise that hate crimes across our country are increasing at alarming rates. One look at Jewish history reminds us of what is happening now. When hate thrives, it always comes back to us as Jews. Always. Now in America, we are seeing that when the rhetoric against immigrants begins to rise, it also rises against Jews. When the rhetoric against Mexicans begins to rise, it always rises against Jews. And when the rhetoric against Muslims begins to rise, it also rises against Jews. For those who hate what they consider the outsider, let us never forget, they hate us too. To them, we are also intruders and trespassers. We are the classic outsider in their minds, who really don't belong in our home, America. To David Duke, we don't belong because we are manipulators bent on controlling the world. To Louis Farrakhan, we don't belong because we are infesting our country like termites. It's been said on the extreme right to the white nationalists, if you're not them, and we as Jews aren't, you're fair game, lumped together with all the other outsiders. While on the extreme left, to the minority protectors, they ironically lump us together with the white privileged oppressors, rather than with the oppressed minorities they are so dedicated to protect. There's a reason that according to the ADL, there was a 57% rise in the number of anti-Semitic incidents just last year. It was the largest single-year increase on record. In our Southwest region, anti-Semitic incidents doubled from 2016 to 2017. We also see it on college campuses, where anti-Israel sentiment is strong, so much so that too many of our own college students are afraid. I think we can all agree the hatred we are all experiencing in the America of 2018 has to stop. Not only is it wrong, it's also now affecting our safety as American Jews. Number 3, can we do even more to build bridges to the other great communities of the great diverse city that Houston is? Can we work hand in hand with other Americans in our greater fight against intolerance, against bigotry, against racism, and against prejudice? My friends, there's one more step I believe we can take that I think perhaps is the most important of all. A 4th step, one that will take some work. It's a way to be more Jewish that I believe at this time is extremely important, because there is something else that is also on the rise: actual hate towards those we disagree with politically. And the reality is, when the rhetoric against those we disagree with begins to rise, it also rises against Jews. Today, basic codes of civility are very hard to find. Instead, it's been replaced with a disrespectful, even disgusting level of public discourse that seems to get worse every single passing day. Both Democrats and Republicans in our day and age do whatever it takes: lies, name-calling, It doesn't matter. Anything to sway votes to win an election. Elected leaders on opposite sides of the aisle are no longer considered fellow Americans who simply have different political beliefs. But instead, those we disagree with are considered enemies, evil people seeking to ruin our lives. Today, 81% of liberals and conservatives have unfavorable views towards those on the other side. I know we are all so sick of the hostility and animosity that seems to fill our televisions, our newspapers, and our social media feeds every single waking moment. But here is my most important question of the night. How could we work to change what is happening in the current world of American politics when too often we do the same? Because in the last several years, I've seen what is happening out there now happening in here. You would be astonished by the level of vitriol I see at Beth Yeshurun, at our synagogue, within our synagogue family, congregants, people I love and respect, not afraid to speak with such contempt and scorn about people they politically disagree. From both sides, full of so much venom and viciousness. The comments people make to me about their fellow Jews would shock you. They make snide remarks about their fellow Jews just because they hold different political opinions, vote a certain way, support a particular candidate, or feel that the government of Israel should move in a certain direction. I don't want to hear it anymore. I pray that it will stop. We are all Jews, part of the same family, but like any large family, as we'll find out in a few weeks at Thanksgiving, any family, we can't agree on everything. It would actually be very odd if we all felt the same exact way on every single major political issue. We're entitled to our differing beliefs. It's wonderful. It's terrific that so many of us are so active and passionate about our politics. We should be. But that shouldn't create vile and intolerable feelings towards fellow congregants. As we saw this past Shabbat, we have true enemies out there. We shouldn't have enemies here at Shul. If we don't like what we hear on cable news or from too many of our elected officials, we must first work to end the hate here within the confines of our synagogue walls. Since the time of its Latin roots, a sanctuary was considered a holy place where people are safe, a shelter, a refuge, even an oasis from the constant pressures and ever-present insecurities of the outside world. More than ever, when we are in a sanctuary, we need an escape from the outside world. We need a place to build our heavenly connections with God and our earthly connections with fellow Jews. We don't need another place to convince others of our political beliefs. Two of the victims of last week's shooting were Cecil and David Rosenthal, two very sweet men who were the greeters, the ambassadors of their congregation. They would greet everyone who arrived with broad smiles, strong handshakes, and warm words of welcome for everyone who walked into the Tree of Life Synagogue. They did not care whether those entering the synagogue were members or guests, rich or poor, gay or straight, Republican or Democrat. Neither should we. We are all Jews. We are all members of the same community. We are all family. Let us be more Jewish. Let us use this awful tragedy. Let it inspire us. Let us find some good in this awful tragedy by working for the civil discourse, real civil discourse, to enhance more understanding. Let us model what we expect from America, a country that needs a communal example of mutual respect more than ever before. I believe in this all-important time, we can rise to the occasion. I hope and pray that we will soon. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. Now you're standing up. You're standing up at the perfect time, because now we want to sing Oseh Shalom and put our arms around each other and sing the eternal words of peace.
Oseh Shalom, Oseh Shalom bimromav, Ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, Shalom aleinu, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru Amen. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru Amen. Ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Oseh Shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Amen. Amen.
And please be seated.